Algebra 2, we're looking at lesson 11.6, which will be based on odds. And I'm sure you've heard that word used before, the odds of a team winning an event, or the odds against a team winning an event, and so forth. Honestly, we're primarily going to be looking at fractions. As always in this unit, we're looking at, just like with probability, is this tied to probability? Is it related to it? Most definitely. Odds a lot of times, however, are given with a colon, and you'll see that written out quite frequently. You can even use the word to in between those numbers. But look, this is so important. The odds in favor of an event. You want the event to happen. So what you will do is really write out the favorable outcomes, the number of favorable outcomes, and divide it by the number of unfavorable outcomes. So here's something that we have to definitely be aware of. You're always going to have the number for an event and a number against an event. But together, when you add those, you'll get the total number of ways that the event can occur. That is super, super, super important for later on in the lesson. We're going to really make a big focus on that. So I always like to write the number of ways that this event could happen that we would consider for that happening, favorable, and then the unfavorable, the ways that would be against. And then, but if you add those two, you'd get the total ways. We're going to need the total ways when we're dealing with probability. And the odds against an event then would just be the number of unfavorable outcomes divided by the number of favorable outcomes. So let's just jump immediately to example 1. And, thank goodness they're going to give you a nice visual. Teresa can win a charity prize. It's going to be randomly selected from 9 prizes shown below. You can see there are a whole bunch of rings. Looks like we've got, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 rings in this, bin or in this box. And that looks like 2 other items. You got a headset, and then perhaps this looks like a camera. So let's find the odds against Teresa winning a ring. So we'd like to know what it is to be for her winning a ring. How many ways can this happen? Well, that would be 7. You can see that we've got all of these right here. How about against? How many prizes can she win that are not rings? We can see here and here, there'd be 2. And the total number of ways, we don't need this right now, but we will, would be 9. So there are 9 total prizes that we have. And by the way, we see that already. 7 of those are rings, and 2 of them are not rings. So we want the odds against Teresa winning a ring. Well, again, if we looked at the odds against, we'd have the number of unfavorable all over favorable. So, really that would be the unfavorable would be right here. This would be favorable. So we need unfavorable 2 to 7. So that's the odds against. The against would be, of course, not winning the ring. This is the number of ways we can. So it's 2 over 7. But then for B, it says find the odds in favor of Teresa winning a headset. Well, now this is a very different scenario. We could say how many ways, and this would be favorable, how many ways could Teresa win a headset? Well, you could see there's only one way that could happen. How many ways could she not get that? That would be unfavorable. Well, you could see that there's going to be the camera and the 7 rings. that would be 8. So there are 8 prizes that are not headsets. So, of course, you still have a total. You add these two together, you get 9. But when you're going in favor, you want to have the favorable all over the unfavorable. What is good versus what is bad. So, we want this to happen. That's a 1. How many ways can it not happen? That would be 8. So there's a 1 to 8 odds in favor of her winning a headset. And another way you could look at it, she would win 1 time. She'd lose 8 out of a total of 9. Let's take a look at the odds in regard to a sports scenario. Right now, we need to go and link in probability and odds. Okay, so let's see here. For letter A, it says the odds against the Cubs winning the World Series are 10 to 1. When we're looking at the odds against, of course, that would be unfavorable over favorable, right? So there are 10 items where you'd say that the Cubs would lose. Out of 10 scenarios, they would lose, whereas with 1, they would win. What would the total be? Well, you could see if they'd lose 10 times, win 1, altogether there'll be 11. So we want to know the probability that the Cubs will win, and we're going to write this as a fraction. The probability that we're going to win is that we want to take the number of ways that they can win divided by the total. And you can see the favorable is actually the winning right here. So it's 1 out of 11. The total here is 11. So that's going to be your probability that the Cubs will win. So that's the difference between working with the odds and converting it into a probability. Very, very, very similar problem. For B, it says the probability that the White Sox will win is 1 out of 61. Well, again, let's think about what a probability of a win would be. It would be the number of times that they could win all over a total. So let's think about this. We can say, according to this, there'd be 1 win. We don't know how many we would have not winning just yet. And then we have a total, and we could say, well, the total would be 61. So the question is, if you win once out of 61, how many times would you lose? And that would be 61 minus 1. That would be 60, wouldn't it? So this would be favorable. We want the White Sox to win. This would be not favorable. This would be the White Sox losing or not winning. So we want the odds now against the White Sox winning the World Series. So we want to have unfavorable when it's against all over favorable. So we'd have the loss all over the win. And how many losses, how many times do you not win the unfavorable? Well, that's 60. How many times do you win? Well, that's just once. So it's 60 over 1. Don't reduce that. Don't just call it 60. That's the one time you don't reduce a fraction, because you're communicating this 60 to 1 odds. All right, well, let's take a look right here at example 3. It says, in a certain board game, players spin a spinner to determine how many spaces they advance. The odds in favor of advancing 5 spaces are 3 to 8. So here's for part A. We've got favorable we've got unfavorable. And if we're going with the odds in favor, favor goes up on top. That's 3, and that's 8. We also want to find the total. So 3 plus 8 would be 11. So when you're saying find the probability of advancing 5 spaces, that probability would say, well, you want that to happen. You want to advance 5 spaces. But of course, probability always has the total down below. So what number was linked to favorable? Well, that'd be the 3. The total would be 11. Let's look at B. It says DeAndre has a box of candies. He will randomly choose one piece of candy. The probability he chooses a strawberry is 7 out of 22. So getting a strawberry would be considered favorable here. And you can see your numerator is 7. The unfavorable would be not getting a strawberry. But then we've got our total. Our total would be 22. So the question is, if you get a strawberry 7 out of those 22 times, how many times did you not get a strawberry? And you'd go 22 minus 7, which would be 15. So what are the odds against choosing a strawberry flavor? Well, you'd be going against whatever this is. That's going to be your numerator. It's unfavorable. You want it to not happen compared to the favorable. So the unfavorable, you can see, is 15. The favorable would be 7. And of course, you should always reduce if you can. For these problems, you pretty much are not having that. Most of these are already reduced. Okay, so finally, find the odds in regard to drawing a card. So let's just look here. We've got 52 cards in our deck. It says find the odds against drawing a black 9. So we can say that a favorable outcome here would be either this 9 of spades or the 9 of clubs. So I'm going to say that's 2. How about for our unfavorable? Well, only 2 of these would be good. There are 52 total. So subtract. If you go 52 minus 2, you'll get 50. So there are 50 ways you won't get a black 9. So you want the odds against. So you want unfavorable over favorable. And that's going to be 50 over 2. Now this is where you do reduce, and you'd write 25 over 1. Last one. In favor of drawing a face card. So you want that to happen. There are 12 face cards, right? There are 12 face cards here. You've got a total of 52. And if we just subtract 52 minus 12, you'll get 40. So there are 40 non-face cards. So you want the odds in favor. So you want the favorable over the unfavorable. So that's going to be 12 over 40. And if you divide out a 4 for both of these, you'll get 3/10. And that's it.